Hello, Daryl. Today I'm with Daryl Turner, head of NITEC, hormone specialist, and in particular the thyroid system. How are you, Daryl?
Good, thanks, John. It's good to be back in Australia, and sorry that I missed you last week in New Zealand.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'd be doing this face to face instead of over Zoom. But I'm super happy getting the information across one way or the other.
Yes. Well, it's very, very important information because every day I'm seeing people with difficult thyroid problems. And of course, it spirals into a cascade of other challenges, doesn't it?
Yes, in fact, thyroid is an inherited problem. In other words, your mother will, if you have a thyroid disorder, which 80% of everyone in New Zealand does, cascade of autoimmune problems, which comes from the thyroid disorder that you inherited as a baby, can turn into either Hashimoto's or Graves' or both, called Hashimoto's or hashitoxicosis. And of course, that can cause you major immune problems from MS to MG to the cascade goes on and on and on. So it is best to catch this as early as you can. So what triggers the autoimmune process, John, is you're born with a thyroid disorder, it's inherited, nothing you've done wrong, and you don't have enough iodine in your diet, and it triggers an autoimmune response.
But prior to the very serious aspects that you're just talking about, there's a whole lot of early warning signs, aren't there, that many people have, like putting on weight and not being able to concentrate properly and a range of other symptoms that tend to be expressed in the questionnaire that you helped develop.
Yes. In fact, that questionnaire, I got those questions out of my endocrinologist handbook. So they're all valid and they cannot be disputed. If you score 8 or more on a questionnaire, you are by definition subclinical hypothyroid. And some of the symptoms are fogginess, lethargic, feeling tired all the time, cold hands, cold feet, cold tip of the nose, the outer third of the eyebrows disappear. You get hair loss in the crowns. And of course, thyroid controls your weight. So if you tend to put on a little bit of weight each year, it's because you're not burning enough calories. We don't particularly use it for weight loss, but it does control your weight. And more than that, for our male and female patients, it controls your ability to do math, because it affects your brain in a major way. For our female patients, it controls the estrogen and progesterone. Therefore, if you are on a roller coaster since puberty, we know that you have a thyroid problem. You do not have to be on that roller coaster. In fact, if you're parents and you have a daughter that is young, you better get her thyroid checked out, because you don't want her ruling the house during certain times of the month.
Well, the problem that most people have who come to see us is they say, I've had multiple thyroid checks and they all come back that my thyroid's okay. They will definitely have a lot of the symptoms from the questionnaire. They could even have a score of over 20, and you're saying a score of over 8 would suggest suboptimal thyroid, and these people have a score of 20, but they're getting blood tests saying that their thyroid's functioning properly. To comment on that?
Very good question. According to Sir Richard Bayliss, head of the Endocrinology Society in Europe, and endocrinologist to the royal family in England, and of course, chairman of the board of the Endocrinology Society in the UK, he stated a few years ago quite clearly, NONE of any of the blood tests that have been done since the mid-1970s, be it TSH, T3, T4, 3T3, 3T4, valid. None of them are valid for determining thyroid function. And he went on to say the only things that are valid are, in fact, the speed of the reflexes, which have been used for the last 200 years, called the Waltman's effect, and the symptoms, which is on that symptoms questionnaire, where if you score more than 8, it won't show up in your blood tests, but you are, by definition, parked into a category called subclinical hypothyroid, where the doctors won't treat you because it doesn't show up in the blood test, and it never, ever will. The speed of the reflexes, though, which, of course, as you know, John, can be tested on the reflex machine called the Thyroflex, is very easy in a 4-minute test to obtain, because you actually have a machine there that can do this with 98.5% accuracy. Don't forget that bloods are 18% accurate. With the Thyroflex machine is 98.5% accurate, and determine the thyroflex speed.
Is this because most of the thyroid-stimulating hormones are actually running through the skin and the muscle into the brain? They're not running through the blood into the brain?
Yes, only 18% of it runs through the blood. And so if you do a blood test, you have an 18% chance of hitting the target. I always tell the story about William Tell, who puts an apple on his son's head, right? And his wife saying, don't. And if he uses blood, he has an 18% chance of hitting the apple. If he uses our system, it's 98.5%, he's going to split the apple in half. So what's your choice? Do you want to use blood or do you want to use reflexes?
One of the only downsides is you've got to be in a clinic to have it tested, don't you? You can't post the sample. So it means you've got to attend the clinic and have a reflex test done.
Yes. It's a 4-minute test. You and some other practitioners throughout New Zealand have these machines. They've been in use in New Zealand for 20 plus years. By the way, this machine has been used a lot. In February 2022, we passed patient number 2 million that have been tested on this machine. We're now approaching, in the last few years, because we do fairly a lot of testing in India, the 3 million mark. Yep. And we've had outstanding results and not one complaint about the accuracy of the test. Why? Because we're using an old-fashioned method, right? It's called the Waltman's effect, used for over 200 years. Every time a baby was born, including myself in the 1940s, right? My doctor did a heel kick test when I was born, just the speed of my reflexes. When I was a young boy sitting in the 1940s and 1950s on his table in Napier, New Zealand, he tapped my knee with a reflex hammer and he would judge the speed of my reflexes and ask me, do you have cold hands? Is your brain foggy? And he'd ask me a series of questions. I didn't know at the time what they're for to determine whether I needed thyroid medication or not.
Reflexes aren't just between muscles, are they? They're between the neurotransmitters and the brain. It's the ability of the brain to compute complex information, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, the Thyroflex machine tests the speed of the neurotransmitters in your brain, which is greatly affected by low thyroid function. And we also test the speed of the reflexes, and we also test your resting metabolic rate. With those three pieces of information combined with the questionnaire, which is the symptoms from my endocrinologist handbook, we get a picture that's extremely accurate. Not only can we dose you, that is, you can dose the patient correctly, but we can also titrate the patient or adjust the patient's medications to the right dosage with the trifecta. The trifecta, of course, being thyroid, the D3K2, and the iodide. All those things are required at the engine of a car to make the mitochondria, which is your internal engine, work.
Right. And this is the thing that escapes most of the clients who've been going to the traditional medical way of looking at this. Their mitochondria aren't working, their thyroids aren't working. In many cases, their adrenals aren't working. They're not even digesting food very well, and they're being told the tests, none of the tests are showing up at a negative level. They're going backwards and forwards, getting more and more frustrated. But this is not really rocket science once you understand the parameters, is it? You know, the foundation, as you say, 200 years of common sense experience and practical common sense doctors going way back, we're able to pick up information that modern tests aren't detecting.
When we balance the thyroid in your clinic, John, not only do we look at the thyroid, the hypo and hyper symptoms, we also look at the stress modulators, whether you're low on DHE, pregnenolone, GABA. We look at the adrenals because adrenals have a major impact on thyroid function, and we can figure out if you need adrenal support. We look at the iodide levels to see if you have an adequate amount of iodide intake. And of course, we look at sleep. Sleep, of course, is essential to make the medications work. In fact, not only thyroid medication, but any medications you're on, if you're getting inadequate or inappropriate amounts of sleep, like sleep deprivation or irregular sleep patterns, we will address that in one simple consult. So we have that, including the ACTH. And by the way, if you are autoimmune or reverse T3, which is caused by adrenal exhaustion, we do pick that up, and those blood tests are valid. But more than that, John, we have the solution to Hashimoto's, which affects 18% of everyone in New Zealand, Graves, which is a smaller percentage, and with some, I have some amazing stories to tell, called hashimotosis, which is Graves and Hashimoto's, and I have got a smile on my face because I have some New Zealanders out of wheelchairs now, walking and balancing perfectly again.
Yes.
With our DNA, RNA protocol approach.
Yes. So it's not just a matter of being able to find out what's wrong, it's coming up with a practical solution.
Yes. And if you're autoimmune, John, you better get it fixed quick because, as I said, the cascade of autoimmune responses happens. And they're not very, you don't want to end up with Guillain-Barré, MS, multiple sclerosis, or any of the other things that you can, that you can get from having a defunct or out of control immune system. I was a doctor who discovered in my clinical trials 2,200 people over 3 years. By the way, I'm FDA approved, CE approved, FSSI approved, and TGA approved. In our clinical trials, I discovered, and this is what's put me on the worldwide lecture circuit for, I discovered how to reverse Hashimoto's, which is 18%. Hashimoto's is what triggers the autoimmune response. Worse still is if you leave it, you are likely to develop Graves as well, which you cannot be in both places at once, but you're swinging between the two, and that is called hashimotosis. And we know that you have mutant DNA, and we do incredible jobs, as I said, with the DNA test. But we have solutions for reverse T3, adrenal exhaustion. We have solutions for straightforward hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism. We have solutions for autoimmunity. And of course, if you're autoimmune, we must put you onto a special diet. We address that with you. We have special short-chain fatty acids that actually help with your digestive issues. And of course, you must, if you follow our protocols, because we've now treated, in fact, in 2022, autoimmune reversed 1/3 patients. We're not talking about 10 patients or 1,000 patients or 100,000. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people and millions in thyroid. So this is a well-tried, and John, we're proud to say that you have these tools in your clinic.
Yes.
To address these problems with the training that I've given you over the years.
That's right. Well, one of the things I find with some of our epigenetics tests, Daryl, is a lot of people aren't metabolizing fatty acids and they're not synthesizing proteins. So would you like to describe the building blocks, proteins and fatty acids, the building blocks of hormones? Would you like to discuss to some extent how important the fatty acids and the proteins are, and the ability to digest your food properly so you grow the hormones well in the first place?
Yeah, and that is why we use the short chain fatty acid to address some of the digestive problems. But the digestion, which you must get right in these patients, which is primarily caused by autoimmune. So if you address the autoimmune, you're going to get rid of the digestive problems. But there is a negative feedback loop between the brain hormonally and your digestion. Bad digestion, which is you cannot process the fatty acids and the proteins properly, means that your brain is not going to function properly. If you want your brain to function properly, that is, be able to do math properly. I mean, if you've been poor at math your entire life, we know that you have an underlying cause there, or you got fogginess, or you can't think clearly, or you get depression, or you get schizophrenia, or there's a whole cascade of problems that are triggered by the digestive system, the way that the short-chain fatty acids and the proteins are processed throughout your gut. If your gut is dysfunctional, your brain is dysfunctional. And this is a hormonal feedback system.
The brain's not just for thinking, is it? The brain's running our body. It's part of a feedback system. And the brain, while we're sleeping, is running our body. No matter what, even while we're doing math, it's running our body.
Yes, in fact, during the process of sleep, your brain has to clean itself out. And this is a problem with not getting 8 hours and 10 minutes of sleep a day. So it actually opens up these tubes, these receptor tubes, through your whole brain between hours 6 and 8. And it takes all the junk and it flushes it out into your lymphatic system. If you're not getting that right sleep, it can't happen. Your brain cannot function properly. You start making errors, you start making mistakes. So it's a whole cascade of effects. Just a matter of fact, John, I actually happen to sleep 8 hours and 10 minutes a night, regardless of what time I go to bed, or even if I'm traveling overseas, I have to get my 8 hour. My body automatically wants me to sleep, and because I rely on my brain to do the sort of work I do, and I have to be spot on. And so one of the things that you've got to do, especially for your more aging patients, is to get this sleep balance, and we know exactly how to do that. In fact, in our questionnaire, we find out if you have a GABA problem, if you have a melatonin problem, or a serotonin tryptophan problem. It's all delineated, and we know what to target and what to treat and how to get you back. And by the way, it's not only medications, but we use music and relaxation techniques, as well as a cold room and quite a few other little tricks we have up our sleeves to make you recover with your sleep.
Because there's a lot to do with sleep ecology, and then maybe we can just digress for a second about screens, because obviously the human brain was designed to deal with the natural light and nature.
Yes.
And now even you and I today, these screens are extremely helpful. People are overdoing them, aren't they?
Blue light, John.
That's right. But it's more than that, because even during the day, they're doing 6-8 hours of screen time, and the pixelations aren't always coherent. Yes. And people don't really realize their eyes are part of their brain, and it's having a massive impact on their brain faculties. And one of the things I'm noticing, more and more people are just so depleted in proteins and fatty acids, alone the ability to digest them.
The negative feedback loop, right.
The brain is so active processing the information from screens, even just deciphering the pixelated lights, we're needing more and more protein and more fatty acids. And so it's not an accident that people are so hormonal deficient. It's a cause and effect.
In fact, John, we actually tell our patients who have sleep issues not only to listen to the binaural music, but actually alters the brain waves. They have to sleep in a totally dark room. They must not watch TV or be on the computer or be on their phones 1.5 hours before bedtime. Want to all cut off. Don't read a book, or do something different. Listen to the music, read a book, because you've got to turn your brain waves from alpha to beta. In other words, instead of like this, smooth them out. And the light, as you're saying, and that's why you must sleep in a totally dark room. No external lights. You must not have a TV in your room. You must not have a pet in your room when you sleep. All of these are big no-nos. You must be cold. Your room must be cold, not warm. You must not be as snug as a bug in a rug. You must not wear bed clothing to bed. You should only start off with, you should have a hot shower or hot bath. You get in the bed and you let yourself go cold. The body, from when we were used to sleeping on the floor with no bed coverings at all. The body got used to it, and a lot of people ignore their natural sleep patterns. In other words, you have an internal clock inside, and if you ignore those and go for your second wind, you're going to be in big trouble. So there's a combination of things. In fact, I've just been asked to write 5 books. I've just written the first books by a major publishing house, and I've just written the first one on adrenals, stress, and the second one is on sleep. And I go through what affects sleep and how to get good sleep. And if you follow these critical pathways in recovering your sleep, you're going to be able to think clearly. A person who has sleep deprived is going to expose themselves to cancer, a whole lot of other immune issues, as you've just described, the digestion. And I have a very good diagram on what sleep does to the human body from top to bottom. And of course, you cannot make sane decisions. You just can't. So sleep and sleep deprivation has a major impact on a person's health.
It's medicine, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk briefly about the adrenals, because I've worked with thousands of adrenal patients. It's becoming more and more of an issue, and the tests that we're doing are showing more and more people having suboptimal adrenal system. Again, like the thyroid, it's a combination of hormones that are formed from fatty acids and proteins, aren't they? It's your survival system. It's very hard to have a healthy thyroid if your adrenals are suboptimal.
The adrenals play a major role in thyroid health. Adrenals affect hormonally on 4 different levels the ability from the hypothalamus pituitary, the adrenal cortex of the adrenal medulla, a major impact on thyroid, the ability for the thyroid to work. In fact, your thyroid can be normal, and with that, you don't need treatment. But if your adrenals are impacted, it can affect your thyroid's ability to work. The adrenals actually play also a portion in a female's hormones, particularly in estrogen and progesterone. There's a negative feedback there. In female patients, the adrenals have to be working. The adrenals are quite easy to determine. I mean, if you're not thinking right, if you're getting confused, if you've got skin rashes like psoriasis and other sort of skin rashes, you can trace that back to adrenals. But more importantly, if you run out of energy between 2 and 4 p.m., you are adrenally exhausted. That means that your body's saying, hey, put me to bed between 2 and 4 p.m. You say, oh no, I have to go all day. And your body is turning to lipids and blood sugars, pushing you towards diabetes and heart attack, stroke. And that is why you must never, ever be adrenally exhausted, because it has long-term severe effects that actually culminate in heart attack, stroke, and diabetes, and the big C, cancer. And that is why the adrenals must be sorted out and must be balanced. As besides making the thyroid work, there's a whole lot of other risk factors if you do not.
We're also now starting to, because we're living so much longer, these whole neurological conditions in the elderly. And you and I discussed this at a radio interview we did many years ago, but Parkinson's and dementia. My understanding in America is they're diagnosing 3 people with dementia for every 2 they diagnose with cancer. And I think it was 1 every 4 minutes. So, and people are starting to get forms of dementia in their 50s, not just elderly.
Yeah.
Just maybe talk about the role of the hormones in preventing or managing dementia and the various forms of dementia.
If we find that your thyroid is low and is not addressed and treated, I can point the finger to you from clinical trials and say, would you like us to reduce? That means your reflexes are slow and you have the symptoms and you're not treated properly. Would you like us to reduce your chance of getting Alzheimer's, which is everyone's fear, by 50%? In other words, 50%, because it affects the brain, 50% of all Alzheimer's, let alone dementia, and let alone the shaking disorders, the Parkinson's-like tremors, are caused by low thyroid function. In other words, if you address it early and it comes to, and you pick it up when a patient is there, actually reduce the risk of them getting these various dysfunctional brain disorders as they age. And that's actually done on clinical studies out of sweet. So 50% is a major reduction in risk factor.
What about Parkinson's?
That's what I said, the Parkinson's tremors. In fact, we get the patients to hold out a sheet of paper, which you do, you can demonstrate within a few seconds whether they have a tremor or not. And most patients are shocked. And they say, no, let me do that again. Let me do that. Let me do it with the other hand. And of course, the tremor is still there. The brain deterioration has already started. You're already on the way to Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia. It's already setting in. And it's very easy for you to demonstrate, John. Hold a piece of paper out. And patients say, no, that can't be me. No, I've had coffee. No, it's not. Okay, I've had a whiskey this morning.
I think the thing is, because of the endemic stress in society, and these are cascades, aren't they? If they're not digesting it, if their diet's not good enough to start with, there's bound to be problems. A lot of people have a good diet, but they're not digesting it properly. And these things just cascade to these extremely difficult to treat diseases. And we talk about the elderly now, but even just reverse this and start to look what's happening to kids. I've heard that the levels of autism in boys in California now down in 1 in 12. When you and I were young, it was 1 in every 10,000. We barely even knew what autism was. A word that was used, we maybe meet one person by the time we're 25. Now I start to see, especially some of the ethnic communities who come in and start eating going very rapidly into Western diets and eating what they think is health food, like, too much orange juice or too much milk coming from somewhere like China, and the extremely high levels of autism, then they pressure the children into doing too much. And
Well,
suddenly you've
autism,
got these complex diseases that are not in the elderly, they're in the very, very young, caused by some of the same problems, aren't they?
One of the causes of the ADD and all the alphabet soup, the autism, and all the other effects in the young people's brains are thyroid combined with lack of iodine. If we give a patient the correct amount of iodine from preconception, not only are we going to avoid all the deficit disorders, we're going to substantially lower the amount of autism. That is the right amount of iodine, which is 12.5 milligrams of iodide, and we affect the child's life for the rest of their lives because we're able to raise the IQ of any unborn child by simply giving them the right prenatal care, which includes iodine. It's like with folic acid. People used to have a cleft chin or cleft palate or cleft hair lip or spina bifida, and we corrected that with folic acid. What is missing is the addition of iodine, which you're able to do, John. So iodine affects the wiring of the brain. The wiring of the brain is what causes the cascade or the gray scales of autism, as well as all the attention deficit disorders. It's a very simple solution, and they're able to get that from your clinic.
Yes, that's right.
Preconception.
Yes, that's right. Now, talking about iodine, it's not just iodine, it's iodide as well, isn't it? The combination.
The iodine, yes, you have to have the right combination of iodine and iodide. In fact, in our iodide, we add selenium and a few other things that make the iodide pure. And by the way, our iodide is all organically sourced. Yeah. So you don't want to take the synthetics as well. And it's very important to take that. But listen to this. There's one benefit of iodide, the combination, which was discovered by Dr. Lugol's in 1837. And he discovered the right proportions, and he discovered the 12.5 milligrams, which we all adhere to. But it's the main preventer for our female patients of breast lumps, dense breasts, or anything to do with the breast, the uterus. That's the thickening of the uterine lining or uterine cyst or ovarian cyst, and for our men, prostate enlargement, as well as making the thyroid work. Our iodine has a lot of additional benefits, and if you got any breast lumps, it's a major prevention of cancer in any of those areas. And we have an 87% chance on our protocols of reversing your risk of cancer if you have any hotspots, stances, or anything to do with the breast, uterus, ovaries, prostate. And that is worth its money in gold. And that is why the percentage of people with breast cancer in New Zealand has shot up in recent years. I think it's to 1 in 6 now, or 1 in 7. When we had access to a lot of fish, it was a lot lower. And in Japan, virtually non-existent.
Yeah.
Because of their iodine intake.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because the thing about stress is that stress levels are going up, but people are rushing eating their food. They're often, eating a lot of processed and fast foods. The cascades are going in the wrong direction, aren't they? Even though we've got this incredibly rich supply of food available to us, even people eating good food are rushing their food like a wolf rather than digesting it properly. And these cascades we're talking about, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse. From the young with these diseases we've been talking about to the elderly with the disease we're talking about. I saw something the other day in America. They're spending $4.3 trillion a year on health and human services. That's the equivalent of the 8th biggest economy in the world, but 77% of the people can't pass the military test.
Yes.
In other words, they have never been sick at a chronic disease level, and yet they're spending more and more money. New Zealand's following these trends at an alarming level.
Because of the ultra-processed foods and the seed oils. You should not be having any seed oils at all. I mean, you should be eating avocado oil or olive oil, because ultra-processed foods are just in New Zealand, everywhere now. Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, I mean, you name all the fast food chains, they're eating the wrong type of foods. And of course, that is contributing to stress on the body. Don't forget that stress comes from not only money and family and marriages and partners, but it also comes from the type of food you eat: flour, white flour, dairy products, the medications you're on. It can come from all sorts of other things that can affect your stress. We can go on, John, because there is so much more for me to tell you, including our amazing ability. Now we're able to do the DNA test with an RNA intervention that has absolutely incredible effects. But I have to sign off, and I'd like you to say the last few words. Thank you.
Just thank you very much, Daryl. Just to on that DNA test, can that be done in New Zealand, or we have to send away to America for that?
Cannot be done in New Zealand. You send the test kit over, you send the test kit back to us. We do it, I analyze it, we write the report, and we do an RNA intervention. And John, I just want to summarize this before we stop. It's about quality of life.
Yes.
We give people back their quality of life that they didn't know that they were missing. Thank you.
Vital. Well, thank you very much, Daryl. I'm talking to now, Daryl. You've been nominated 3 times for a Nobel Prize now, have you?
I'm in the nomination process.
And you're recognised as a world authority in thyroid health.
I'm number 3 in the world.
So I want to thank you, Daryl.